Welcome back to Advancing with Watercolor, and today we're going to look at a specific type of painting which we call a nocturne. It's a painting done of a night scene, and in this case it was done on location. This was done at a workshop this past November in Japan, and we had an occasion because of the weather to go out on a couple evenings and paint some night scenes. So I'm going to show you a photograph I took of this this location, which is called Yasaksa Shrine in Kyoto, Japan. And every evening it was like this. It seemed to be a sort of celebration. The shrines and the public areas are very well illuminated, so they provide some opportunities for people who like to sketch and paint in the open air. And this is the particular shrine that I'm focusing on. It's the main gate that allows one into the kind of courtyard where there's smaller areas. And you can see they're very busy with a lot of people. And was autumn season, so the momiji, or the Japanese maple, was also very beautiful when it was illuminated. And I'm going to show you the sketch that I did, that I did on location. And you can see a lot of liberties were taken and simplification was made to the motif. And it was populated with a lot of figures, but my main intention when doing this painting was to get sort of the festive atmosphere. That meant crowding it with figures, and also to get the luminosity that we felt in the shrines. They seemed to almost be glowing in the night, because of the bright colors that adorn the shrine, and also because of the way they were illuminated. So I'm going to show you how, back at the studio, how I put this painting together. My first step is to sketch it out, but then I get right into painting the structure itself. It's not a pagoda, but it's a Shinto shrine, which is painted with a bright vermilion color, and this forms the main gate. And I'm painting that with an attention to brush strokes. I'm leaving a lot of white in this painting, especially in this early stage, because I anticipate that will have a bearing on the luminosity, or create the feeling of light or even glare of lights in the final painting. So you see in the upper section the strokes are broken, and some areas appear unfilled, but these areas will be positives because they'll be like I anticipate they'll be like a light reflecting off of a railing, or under the eaves, or on a lantern, or these sorts of things. And I'm using here cadmium orange and a bit of vermilion to create the bright tones. The bright tones are eventually going to be surrounded by darks. And in this underpainting, I'm creating just a lot of the structure. Yes, the particular structure is important, but I'm also creating placement of brighter colors. Some alizarin crimson in the roof, a lot of orange, cad orange, and vermilion in the temple itself and in the foreground, and also a lot of scattered whites. It's not a bad strategy to leave a lot of whites, because later on you can go back and just touch them with a little color, pushing them back into the painting. And in this first stage I feel very at ease putting a lot of bright color. I put a graded wash into the foreground to give us a feeling of, again, compact the light and give us a feeling of a sort of reflective surface that the pavers might have. And I finish this first application by putting a few cool colors into the sky. Again, aware of the white that I'm leaving around the structure. This is a key part of the painting, of this painting, since it's going to be a very dark painting overall, is to leave a few whites where you want accents, or you want your audience to focus on. That's what I'm doing here. Most of these are created with the technique of dry brush, meaning the brush, even though it's quite large and holds a lot of liquid, has been dragged across a piece of paper or my towel that I carry with me to take out a lot of the liquid, and then pulled across the surface of the paper, giving a very rough mark, a broken mark. And also important to this is the use of rough paper. This helps me to create that sort of texture. I use Arches 140-pound rough for most of my work. Well, this first painting now is dried off, and I can go about very liberal application of strong darks. I'm using combination of ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, and neutral tint, which is basically a black. It's a black that doesn't have any coolness or any warmth, so it's great for graying colors. And I'm using that with the mixtures of ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson to get the strong, intense night sky. And as it goes on, it's sometimes hard to judge because it all looks equal. It's hard to perhaps see a change in the sky when it's wet like this. But I know from experience that as it dries, the blues, the reds will come out a little more. You'll see them in a subtle fashion, but they will come out. And as we get close to the structure, you can see how important this dark is to generate brightness through the structure. And it's basically all I have to do is come up against it and define some edges. I'm not painting the sky thoroughly in the background. I'm leaving little gaps here and there, not really predetermined. They just happen because of the way I use the brush. But I don't go back and cover them. I leave a lot of them until the final stage of the painting when I'm adjusting the lights. One of the things about doing a night painting that can be difficult, especially on location, is finding a place where you have a little light so that you can see your subject. And this kind of area, public area, naturally it's well lit, so finding light is not a problem. But it was so busy on this evening that finding a space in the corner that was still illuminated so that we could paint was a bit difficult. And manageable, though. It was manageable, and I was very pleased with the sketch that came out of that. So you can see, as I work into the lower third of the painting, I'm focusing more on roof lines, small windows, or lights that appear under the roof, and I'm describing them very loosely with a lot of broken strokes. Again, this is a favorite technique of mine, is to use the rough quality of the paper and a dry brush to get a sort of sparkle or rough-edged mark. Once I start to refine the shapes of this near structure or any other part of the buildings that I want some detail to, I'll switch to a smaller sablette. It's a round, I think it's a number 10, but the reason for that is I can still make the dry brush barks, but I can make smaller ones. I can control it a little more and add deeper, in this case I'm adding deeper colors to the main structure, the gate. I'm using vermilion and a bit of cad red to go under the eaves and sort of give the feeling that light is shining up onto the understructure. And I go back and forth in this manner, adjusting, once the paper is dry, I'll adjust it with some more dry brush strokes and purposely keep it vague. If you compare it to the picture, you recognize the silhouette, but you don't see nearly the amount of detail that you do in the structure itself. And this is intentional because I want it to appear as just a glowing object, and with some attention to the roof lines, the balcony, and the gate. So it's got a very loose feel, and this is a quality that I like in paintings. It gives it a sort of animation. And now we get into a placement of figures, and I think it's worthwhile to note how they're created. I start with the torso, and basically just put a big blob or brushstroke down, and after that I start to fashion legs or arms or heads. But I'm looking for an arrangement first of all, and this is harder than it sounds because we're very good at putting things at regular intervals and with regular spacing, such as a fence or this sort of thing, but we're not so good with a random placement. And groups like this, or flocks of birds, herds of other animals, are much more random than we think. And so to generate this random quality, I try to think of different spaces between the people, and different depths in the picture. So some are near, some are far. The spacings and groupings are rather random, and it's all out of my imagination. In other words, if you look at the reference photo or any of the photos I took, you won't see this arrangement. That also helps me, the fact that I'm not leaning on a photograph to place the figures in an interesting or convincing way. I'm more apt to create this random placement than if I was trying to follow a photograph. And there is a central figure to this too, a figure that I want you to see perhaps above the others. And we do this by kind of isolating the figure. So if you look towards the bottom third center, there's a single figure against the main pagoda. And she's in the middle ground. She's not close, but she's isolated. In other words, the other figures are in some contact with the building above or each other. This one is isolated, and it's a great way to make this figure the focal point of a painting. So that's what my strategy is in placing figures in this painting, is to give a feeling of a busy quality. In other words, there's a lot going on, people moving to and fro, conversations and things like this. And a little bit of, you'll see, I believe, a smaller figure appear at some point. A lot of families were there. And they're against the light, so the light is coming from behind. Thus, you see the long, dark shadows coming to the bottom of the painting, giving a feeling of randomness to their placement, and at the same time organizing so that I do have a central figure in all of this, a figure that you might notice before you notice the rest. And in that figure, I can put a little more detail, a little different coloring, to show either context, like in this particular location, we did see a lot of couples in kimonos, and it just added to the authenticity, I thought. I know that it's out of the ordinary to see them in a little bit out of the ordinary. I shouldn't say completely out of the ordinary, because a lot of the Japanese still wear the kimono on such an occasion when there's a festival or an event. But we noticed them even in walking the streets. A lot of, I guess they were tourists, were wearing kimonos. It's a popular thing in Kyoto now to rent a kimono. And so it becomes, for the artist anyway, it becomes perfect, because you feel like you're transported back to Japan as it was hundreds of years ago. And here I have a mixture of dress, so I'll put in one or two kimonos, but I'm more concerned about this busy feeling of figures of receding towards the main gate, and the light that's coming from the main gate is really the main draw for me in this painting. What I'm doing now is starting to place some into these blobs that I've created. I'm placing some colors, a lot of red, some blue here and there, Some places I'll lift the color and fade the figure into the depths a little more. And I continue to build the figures in this way until I get a relatively satisfying portrayal. This is the time, for me anyway, if I'm going to add some detail, and it may be accents to the structure itself. It may mean adding a highlight that I would like to see on a figure or a rooftop. It may mean adjusting some of the white that I've left. I could put a little wash of blue or a little red over the whites that I've left. Any of these smaller things. Well, here's the finished piece, and you can see some details were added. The solitary figure is coming forward in the painting, and I've added smaller two figures in the lower. Added details, but overall the first structure of light is coming through, and I'm very pleased with that. To me, it reminds me of the scene that we saw in Kyoto, and every time I see it, I feel I'm back where we spent an evening painting at Yasaksa Shrine.